Welcome to an all-new Restoration Today podcast brought to you by Dot. Replace heavy jugs plus get better mold cleaning power with less odor and less product. Dot Cleaner features dilute oxidation technology powered by Dot's patented NT7 molecule. Get a free sample of Dot Mold Stain Cleaner and 20% off your first order at dotcleaner.com. A little does a lot. Hello there. Thanks for checking out another episode of the Restoration Today podcast. Today, I am very excited to be joined by the current RIA president, Mark Springer. He is also the president of Dayspring Restoration and part of Fleet Response, which is a new big restoration company that is continually growing and acquiring new companies. So we're going to get into a conversation about Fleet in a few minutes, but I want to start by kind of having Mark tell his story in restoration, and more starting in like 2019, 2020. Dayspring's been around for a while, but you started to feel like, all right, maybe it's time to grow. Maybe it's time to do something different. So Mark, thank you for joining me. Share a little bit about your background first and what started transpiring in 2019 and 2020.
Yeah, well, first of all, Michelle, always appreciate the conversations that we're able to have about a lot of different things in the industry. And I, again, congratulate you on all the fine work that you are doing, carrying the very big and impressive mantle of CNR, and you're doing it with such grace and energy. I just want to commend you on that. Thank you for what you're doing there. And again, grateful to have the conversation about Dayspring and about Fleet. So rewinding to 2019, our organization, Dayspring Restoration, based in Montana. At that point, we had 6 locations across Montana. We had really reached an inflection point. It was this point where we had gotten to this stage of the business where we had, I think in 2019 we were around 125 to 140 people, somewhere in that range. So a lot of people, a lot of individuals in the organization that we had been so blessed to have on our team and be able to grow with and be able to build this amazing company. But we saw a bunch of stuff happening in the industry. The industry was starting to consolidate. And Dayspring, I would have an email or a phone call at least every week, sometimes multiple times a week, from someone saying, hey, we want to have a conversation with you guys about Dayspring becoming a part of what we're doing. And those were a bunch of what are called strategics in this consolidation effort. So there's big restoration organizations. And then a bunch that had an idea to be in restoration or just wanted to be investors in this space, investing in a company that's growing regionally. And, as though a lot of those conversations started, we had a couple of things coming up for us. One was we had a group of 4 shareholders in our organization. Some were ready to exit. They'd been in the business for a long time. One was my father, who started Dayspring back in the 80s. So he was ready to get out of this crazy business. His son had spun up all over the place. Some other founders of other companies that we had merged with or acquired along the way. And they were kind of at that point where they're ready to retire. And so my options were either buy them out, which was going to have huge financial implications. And then what does that do to our growth, right? If I take all of this capital to acquire these guys and buy these shareholders out, we are going to be really stunted in what we can do for growth moving forward. So that was an option. And we just had to really start thinking through it. And then boom, 2020 hits us and COVID. And all of the implications of that, the risk factors associated with that. And as you and I talked a little bit earlier, it was challenging for us because we were looking at the options, and one option was PPP, and for a variety of reasons, we decided not to take PPP. And some of those were practical questions, and some were philosophical issues that just led us not pursuing that route. But it was evident we are going to have to accelerate some of these discussions. And so that was a little bit of the backstory on kind of what led to the point that we ultimately had these discussions with THP that then ultimately led to the brand that's being built in Fleet.
Okay, so what is it like when you start talking to private equity firms? That's different than getting bought by, say, a First Onsite or an ATI or whatever. Private equity is a different animal, right? So what made Trinity Hunt for you different and made Dayspring and Trinity be a good partnership together?
Mm. Yeah, and so a lot of these are, in fact, most of them, not all of them, but most of the companies right now in our industry are private equity backed. So it's become pretty ubiquitous. But there are a bunch of right now. There's a bunch of private equity firms that are looking at this industry because some of the aspects of the industry that are pretty attractive to them. But THP was someone who, as we started to get to know them initially, actually, it's kind of funny because when one of the principals reached out to me from THP initially, it was just another one of all of these investors. And I was just like, oh, it's just nonstop noise, right?
Yeah.
But then we got to the point that we started having a serious discussion with them. And, as we started to say, okay, we're going to have to look at our options. Let's look at all of our options. And as we started to get to know Trinity Hunt, we found a couple things about them were different than a lot of the other equity firms that were out there. And the opportunity that we had moving forward with THP was different than what we ultimately would have had as another option with some of these other strategics. And again, these other strategics run by some of the best minds I know in the industry, some of the best people I know in the industry, holds so many of these people in incredible regard. So none of this is negative about a lot of these other options that are out there, just to be clear. But what we found with THP was, first of all, they were very mature and experienced. So a lot of these private equity groups that were reaching out to us, I mean, they might be 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. They were relatively new. And with THP, we found a partner that had 30 years of experience. And they were at the point that we came in with them, they were on their 5th fund. So they had, I think at that point, it was around 1.5 billion of their own equity under management. That doesn't include all the other leverage maybe out there. So just an incredible amount of maturity that came there. And there's a lot of the smaller private equity firms, and some of these private equity firms, I mean, they may have 100 million under management. And that sounds like a ton of money to someone like me or probably you, I got 100 million, wow, holy smokes. But in the equity world, that's a tiny amount of money. And the challenge that comes with that, and there's a lot of horror stories that people have heard about equity, is that when you have a smaller fund, especially when I've been around a long time, two things can happen. I'm not saying it will happen, but it can happen. And I have a lot of friends, not only in this industry, but in other industries, other entrepreneurs who've had the experience where once the equity comes in, they take because they have a limited amount of capital they're managing, they take a very hands-on micromanagement approach. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of egos that start becoming at odds with one another. You got this restoration operator who knows the business. They know the complexities of what we deal with. They know this business is cyclical. There's ups, there's downs, there's surges, there's hurricanes, there's freezes, there's all this different stuff. And none of that you can predict in a year. And, so they have this background. And then you got this other hand, someone that got their MBA at Wharton, and they're really smart. They were the smartest person in their class. And they know, they got all the answers for why a business should run the way it should run. And they want to come in and they want to start meddling in the business. And they want to come in and start telling the operator, here's what you're going to do. And here's how you're going to do it. And it creates a lot of problems. And the other issue is also one of expectations, right? So these guys come in, they look at your financials and they go, wow, you had a great year last year because you had a hurricane, or you had a once in 100-year freeze or something like that. And that is what they expect every year moving forward. And it just creates these unrealistic expectations, result in what a lot of people would describe as probably hell on earth. And that is having a financial partner. It doesn't need to be that way. There's lots of ways to manage around that. But THP had presented a larger, more mature fund, one that was really let us provide for the entrepreneur what they need to grow. And they have a bunch of equity firms also have an approach of how do we come in and save money to add to the bottom line. THP's model is, what do you need to provide? Instead of how do we reduce costs, how do we add pieces to the business that will accelerate growth and make this entrepreneur more successful than they were all by themselves? that model, as you and I've known each other long enough, that probably attractive to Mark Springer more than the former. So that was, of course, that hit a lot of notes for us. I mean, we had tons of not only them having due diligence on us, but us on them, find out, okay, is this really true? Are these guys really they say they are, right? So that was probably better than 6-month process, longer than 6-month process, but I can just say THP has been now that I've been, had a relationship with them for over a year and a half. They've been everything that they said they would be, and everything they've told us, they've kept their word on. So it's been a good thing.
All right. So you're involved with THP, and I'm knowing you, I'm guessing that the idea of fleet response was in your head before THP came along. I'm guessing, as you said offline, you're a builder and you can look at your track record in the industry with your own company, and then the RIA and the AGA and these other things that you've been involved with in the industry, right? So you have this equity now, and fleet response is in the back of your mind. So when did you start kind of talking to companies in the background and coming up with what the core of fleet would be? Like, what makes fleet different as a combination of companies and a growing company versus some of the others that are maybe kind of similar in the industry?
Yeah. Well, first of all, so fleet itself, that's a lot to work through, but we'll take it up. We'll eat that off in a bite at a time here. Yeah. So first of all, fleet was not in my mind before we started. Fleet was, we actually ended up working with a firm that THP is another one of those resources we probably wouldn't have by ourselves, but THP had a firm, I think in Dallas, that they developed a bunch of different brands with. And it was a great process. It was probably I can't remember how it took longer than you ever wanted to, but it was a multi-month process to develop what's the brand, what does this stand for, why does fleet make sense as a name for the brand, right? Because ultimately, we landed on fleet, which is short and memorable and means multiple things. It means we're fast, we're kind of like the fleet of foot, and it also means a fleet like a group of, you think about a fleet of battleships, all these people coming together with this common purpose. So there's a bunch of stuff that means, but in fact, the first time I heard fleet, I didn't know if I liked it. What I did have an idea about before was being able to build something with people. And this is the only reason anything with Dayspring has ever been successful, the only reason that anything with RIA was successful, and the reason anything with fleet ever will be successful is just going to be based on the people that we have in this with us. I mean, Dayspring, I could sit here and we could spend a whole podcast talking about the people that built Dayspring to what it is today. And RIA, all the people, right? I mean, I just happened to be there where there was enough people that had enough concern about what was happening in the industry to say, we need to do something about this, and we can do this together. And it's the same thing with fleet. I mean, it's not me at all. It's these amazing people that we get on our teams. And you and I were talking about Julie Johnson here before. I haven't known Julie. I've known of her company, just because they're in Montana. This is Alpha Omega, this is actually our very first acquisition with fleet. And those people, Willie and Julie Johnson, amazing people.
Yes.
And they add so much to what we're doing in Montana. And right now, like me thinking about doing it without them is almost unthinkable now. And that was the same thing with Dayspring. I mean, the people we have on our team that we built over a couple decades, this morning, I was telling the whole team, we have everyone's bigger team now, right? And I was just telling everyone, I'm the luckiest man in the world. I get to work. I can't wait. When we have our leadership team meetings and stuff, I can't wait to work with these people. They're smart, they're fun, they're creative, they're committed. I mean, all of this stuff, that's what this is all about. And it's what fleet's going to be. And, that's what you asked. I think you asked, I don't think I've answered a third of the questions that you just posed.
Sorry.
But
I want to know.
I will say is different. People ask what's different about this.
Yep.
And it is truly, this is a thing. It is a family thing, and families are exclusive. Not anyone can be in a family.
Yep.
And there's people that want to be a part of what we're doing. And this sounds like I probably shouldn't even say this, but there's certain cases where it just doesn't make sense. You know, there are companies, our DNAs are just different, just like families. My family, all my kids and everything, you know, I got the whole pack of girls in the Springer house. We all share the same DNA. And Julie and Willie, they share our DNA.
Yes.
You know, I mean, the integration with those guys, it's like, man, if all we ever had was the integration of those guys, I mean, same DNA. Burke's over in Spokane and Coeur d'Alene, same DNA. Dower, same DNA. Cousineau, same DNA. Future ones too. That's what we look for. And that makes it fun and different. And, you know, some of these massive consolidations that are happening, you know, time's going to tell. As to if they can do what they want to do. I was talking to someone at one of these big organizations a couple of weeks ago, and I mean, the ego side will be interesting. I mean, it's some pretty alpha folks, you know, in really close proximity that, you know, time will tell. But, you know, we are not about, for us, it's not about, can we get to $1 billion? A lot of these things people thought, get to $1 billion, whatever. We know this. We know that companies like Dayspring and Dalworth and Alpha and Burks were companies that were embedded in their marketplaces. We are very customer centric. Most of our companies have very, very little, if any, TPA work in their portfolios. Very, very little. Our focus is the customer and the people. And actually, from a priority standpoint, it would be in reverse to that. Our first priority is if we have an incredible organization for people where the culture of our people is first, and we provide a career opportunity for people in our teams where they can grow and they can help people and they can have success that they maybe never thought that they could in an industry like this, then our customers are taken care of. And we're going to be a part of the communities that we're in. I mean, even though Dalworth is in Dallas, most of our companies, we're not looking for, you know, teams with an NFL franchise. A lot of the big guys, that's what they're looking. They want to be in the cities where there's an NFL team. We want to be in communities where we can make a difference. And that's what Dayspring does. You know, Dayspring was not in a single city of over 100,000 people. But we had built this company, you know, that does, you know, and our total population we serve was like less than 500,000 people, but we were doing 20 million in that size just because we were part of the communities that we're in. And that's really what's, I think, different about what Fleet is building.
So how does the branding work within Fleet? Like, are any of these companies going to be rebranding to Fleet, or are they maintaining their own branded identity? Especially like you were talking about, a lot of these, like Dayspring does, but Dalworth, these companies, Cousineau has been around for a long time. They already have these reputations in their communities, right? So how's the branding going to work?
So it's going to vary depending on the needs of that location that we're in. So, for example, ultimately, Fleet is going to become a national brand, right? That is going to be the finish line. We're all going to be able to have a discussion when someone says, you know, let's just say that there were, you know, the Empire State Building had a fire in it. You know, at some point, Fleet will be in that discussion as, if you're the building manager for the Empire State Building, I got bids here, you know, from ATI Restoration, First On-Site Restoration, and Fleet, you know, so that will be the finish line at some point. But in the meantime, we're going to still keep the identities that we have. So Dayspring, you know, could at some point be doing business in Montana as Fleet. That's pretty doable because we're in small markets. You know, Dalworth probably is going to have that brand. There will probably be, you know, Fleet Response by Dalworth. Ultimately. So, you know, these companies are incredible pillars of the communities that they're in, and that's not going to go away. An analogy I think somewhat of as a national brand is like Ace Hardware. You know, they'll still see, like in Bozeman, Montana, you know, you've got this Owen House Hardware. You know, they were awesome hardware company in Bozeman, Montana. Now it's Owen House Ace. And, you know, so you'd have the best of kind of the national brand that people can identify with Ace Hardware, but Owen House is who the culture and who the organization is.
Yep. I agree with that. I worked for a local hardware store that was bought by an Ace in high school and college. That was my
There you go.
first job. So, yep, I get it. But Ace still kind of has, talking about a nationwide company, because of their local ownership, still they have that community feel versus like a
Yeah,
Home Depot or a Lowe's, right? So
totally.
that makes sense. So what is your process for growing? Are you approaching companies? Are companies approaching you? Is it a mix of both? What does that look like?
Totally a mix of both. Right now, we probably have far more people reaching out to us than we can deal with right now. And part of THP's philosophy in building this is to essentially have a strong regional hub in the different areas. We've broken the country up into regions that then have the ability to facilitate the infrastructure for the other companies that become partners of that organization. So again, why was Dayspring someone that Fleet was interested in? They looked at Dayspring and said, this company has the infrastructure here, from accounting processes, operational processes, sales and marketing processes, information technologies, HR, all of these components of the business already built here for scale. So adding someone like Alpha in makes a lot of sense. Alpha, like Julie, for example, I mean, she's going to have a different role now with us moving forward. And I think probably one that she'll ultimately probably enjoy more than before, where she had to wear an HR hat, an accounting hat, an admin hat. She had all these hats, right? And that's what makes it fun now for people, is that, they have the ability to really work on pieces of the business that they have a high degree of interest and joy in. Joy in our work is really important to us. And so that's a big piece of what we're doing. But certainly there's a lot of relationships. I mean, people like Mike Cousineau and Josh Hobbs and Jerry Burke and Julie John. All these people have a lot of relationships in the industry. And because we are a family, we're pursuing the relationships kind of first. Now we've got, every week we have a lot of people saying, how do I become a part of what you guys are doing? And it's hard because there's some situations where it wouldn't be a good fit, but better for us to all acknowledge that up front and be realistic about what we want to become.
So what does the leadership of Fleet look like? Who all is involved, like on the board and running the show, all of that? What does that look like?
Yep. So the Fleet, so THP, back again, what's their model work like? Their model looks like they have a board of directors and then a partner leadership committee. And those two interface very closely. And it's worked really well for them for 30 years, where they have operators like, myself and Mike Cousineau and Shane Hobbs and other future folks who are coming into the Fleet family will actually be able to collaborate to provide direction to the board as to how the company then executes on those priorities that the partner companies have. Okay. So the board of directors is definitely more of the fiduciary and the finance and the governance side. There's a bunch of people on the board from THP. Again, these are some really, really just experienced, excellent equity finance guys who are able to help a lot of times us operators avoid some of the pitfalls we don't even know exist. I mean, we've never had to go out and get money to go do acquisitions, and these guys do it. They got it down to an art form, Yep. Getting an ERP, for example, I wouldn't even known where. I guess I should say I would have known where to start, but actually running that process, we wouldn't have known how to do that. So those guys have a board. Then they bring onto the board certain advisors and board members from the industry. Like, for example, a lot of people I know, Phil Rosebrook. Phil's on our board, and other industry luminaries who have the expertise to be able to provide the governance, and then they involve the operators still on the board. I mean, THP calls me, or the equity guys, and then the leadership of the company interface with me all the time. We've got, as the CEO of the organization, Dean Murphy. Dean has his backgrounds with private equity and building companies in the construction industry that are able to scale and grow. Dean's just a Have you met Dean yet?
Nope.
Okay, so you'll have a chance to meet him, hopefully maybe at the RI event. He'll be there. Just, brings a whole different perspective to our industry. But I've learned so much from him in the last year and a half about stuff I had no idea existed. It's really been a fun process.
So what advice would you give other restorers in the industry who are kind of in the same boat of everybody's consolidating, everybody's getting bought up, I'm getting approached by all these people, I don't know what to do? What advice would you give them on trying to determine next steps for their company?
Yeah, so I mean, the first thing is I think there's a lot of people, and I even see this on social media sometimes, there's this like FOMO, they call it the fear of missing out, right?
Yep.
And I just would encourage people, that should be the absolute last piece that should motivate you as you evaluate what you're doing. So in these businesses, and the people that count on us in these businesses to make good decisions are so complex, and they are such an important stewardship that no one should be making decisions based on fear of missing out. And there's some of that right now because there's so much stuff happening. I mean, I see you probably have a new announcement like every 2 days. I've seen.
Oh my gosh, at least it's hard to keep up with. It's a lot.
You can't keep up. So it's happening fast.
Yep.
But first of all, I would just encourage anyone who's looking at this to surround yourself with people who know you and can understand your priorities, that are perhaps maybe broader than I call it the echo chamber that you have, and just people all think like you. Because there is every single person, like for me, I had, for example, I'm part of a group called YPO, and I had this group of people, other entrepreneurs in Montana that I was able to get advice from who are not restoration operators. I mean, one guy runs a huge retail company all over the Western United States. One guy's manufactures clothes. One guy's a real estate guy. All these guys that I was able, and they had experience with private equity, and they were able to help me to avoid some of the pitfalls that exist. And there are some big pitfalls that people could fall into, and they could literally make their lives miserable if they don't have good advice. So first of all, get good advisors. And not just people in this industry. Get people who understand what your goals are, who understand what make you tick, understand what's important to you, understand where you are with your family. Your family, how I looked at this decision is different today than how I would have looked at it 15 years ago when I just had little kids. Different place of life. So that would be the first thing. Second thing is, there's a lot of different people trying to get your attention right now who have interests other than your interests. Mm-hmm. And there are either good people, take, for example, the brokers. There's the group of folks who will represent a restoration company. Mm-hmm. And you got to make sure, if you're going to work with a broker, that you're working with someone who has your interests at heart. And I was talking to someone the other day, and this guy said, I want to do what Mark Springer did. And so the person, well, you need to start doing construction. And, because this person isn't doing repair and reconstruction in the company. And Dayspring does reconstruction. They kind of identified this as something that's important, is doing repair. And I said, here's what I think is important is, again, once you know what your priorities are, you got to build your team around that. The reason that we were able to do what we do was not because we were good at mitigation or we had a repair department that was successful, or the blend of the work that we had in our business was what it was, or even because we don't do TPA work. The reason that we were identified for what we could do was because I had a really strong leadership team around me. I had a really strong CFO who came from outside this industry. Most restoration companies do not invest in finance. They have very, very skeleton crew finance departments. Mm-hmm. And we made a big investment in that area. And when the equity guys looked at us, they're like, here's guys that can speak our language. Here's guys who get it. Here's guys who understand when we need these pieces for our requirements that we have. I mean, they have huge audit requirements and so forth. These guys are going to be able to provide that for us. We had a robust HR department that was built for growing our company, not just people to, make sure people aren't running in the halls, but people who are able to really build and recruit in this industry and then onboard and provide a career path for people in this industry. We had a robust training department. We had a robust infrastructure around intake and technology for how we centralize the services to be able to scale and grow. And so, I think for someone to be attractive to equity, before knowing that you're a good operator, because I think they kind of assume you know how to do restoration work, they want to partner with people who understand how to build and scale a business. And that's an area where people can really look at and invest and do. For me, it's just, man, my secret's easy. Get great people around who are smarter than you. And that's what I got. I got a whole bunch of people who are way smarter than me in those areas of expertise. And that's what they would want to think about if they wanted to do what we did. Now, if they don't want to be used as like a platform company like our company was, then, maybe being a part of someone else, a bigger company, if it was a strategic option they want to look at, spend time thinking about and documenting what your culture is. Know what is our company look like? Why do people want to work here? Why do they stay working with us? Why do they come work here? And if you have a strategic that's going to acquire you, that'll be the very first place you should start is, do we have a good fit here? I had a friend in California, got acquired by one of the big strategics. Within a few months, 30% of the people left. This isn't what I signed up for. This is not fun. I do not want to be a part of this. This is not awesome at all. And having that conversation about, here's what our culture is, here's what makes us tick. Does this strategic company have evidence, not just platitudes? And they say, we want to take care of our people. Where's the evidence that they do what we do, so that we can be assured all these families and these people that are part of what we've built here are going to be honored and taken care of moving forward. I had some opportunities. I could have made a lot more money going a different direction with some of the strategics that wanted to acquire our company. But I knew there is no way we're going to have a whole bunch of people who are not going to be even needed in this new organization. And those people have put their trust in me. I cannot dishonor that trust that they put in me.
Yep. I get that. Those are really good points. I have talked to a lot of owners who have made similar decisions to you. And it's interesting to hear the trend of, I could have made more money, but it was about my people. So I love that about this industry. And a lot of people try to make the decisions right for the right reason. So, okay, I want to talk a little bit more about people. This is changing directions a little bit, but people ask me all the time, what industry trade shows should I go to? There are quite a few. So I'm shifting over to RIA now. And so I always say RIA for the networking and the learning and whatever. And there's, I think, a lot of new stuff coming to this year's convention. I think it's going to be a really great event to be at, as it always is. But what would you say to people who are trying to weed through all of the shows that are in the industry? And there are many back to back this year too, which is going to make it difficult for people to decide why should people come to the convention this year?
Yeah. So obviously, it's very difficult for me to approach this topic without a fair amount of bias.
That's okay. That's why I'm asking. You're allowed to be.
And so I would just characterize it this way, Michelle. I think about all the different options that are out there. You have to think about, where can my time be best used? And the thing that RIA has proven itself in over the entire period of not only the pandemic, and how do we help our members navigate through this mess that we were all in, but even pre-pandemic, in the advent of AGA and all of the work product that AGA has. These volunteers, incredible what they've done for AGA. Is, where am I going to be equipped to be able to not just look at equipment and look at certain sessions about the different hot buttons that are out there in the industry, but where am I able to be equipped to understand, how does advocacy for our industry advance, and how does our industry have voice? And this is the area where RIA isn't just different, it's all by itself, right? Yeah. And I know there's some people talking about advocacy and so forth now, but it's one thing to talk about it, and it's another thing to actually do it.
Yes.
And when I look at, not only what has been done through all those volunteers, but then the work that Ed Cross has done as an advocate for restorers, the things that have happened. Take, for example, the third party consultant issue. I mean, we didn't just put a bunch of thoughts together and all those volunteers put this work product together in those position statements. We then went out and had all the conversations with the third party consultants to say, here is the restorer's perspective. Here's why this is detrimental to the industry, and here's how we fix it. And ultimately, through very long discussions, that's what happened. And it changed. I get people regularly reaching out to me and saying, this third party consultant issue, that alone was worth it for me to be a part of this. And, I think a lot of people have this perspective. I'm going to go to a trade event and I'm going to find out about some new tools and toys, and I'm going to get some, a few education things I'm going to sit into. But what fundamentally shifts the business? And I can tell you this, if you can take the approach to be able to go in and say, okay, I have not just some seminars and that sort of stuff, but I actually have tools I can take back that I'm aligned with other restorers and that are going to actually shift the entire way that we do our business, then I want to be a part of that. Mm-hmm. And we need to have these operators making their voice heard, because RIA actually listens to that. Every single position statement that we have is the net result of member feedback. There's never been a position paper that we have published that has not went through like 4 levels of peer review.
Yep.
And everyone's voice has been heard. And then we come into it and we say, all right, if it's Ed Cross, for example, Ed, here's what you need to advocate for on our behalf. And that's done in a respectful and a proactive and an outcome-based approach that the results are, there's nothing like it. And that's why I'm so proud to be a part of it, is because it's actually making a difference. And I've never seen something in my career, outside of maybe when some of the work ICRC's done with some of the standards, when those came to bear on the industry. I'm thinking outside of those where it's actually made a difference like this.
Yes. The AGA always has amazing things coming out, the construction price list, position statement, and all the new things. And looking for a new advocate this year on the.
That's right. Yep. So, big new stuff happening.
Yep. All right. So there's a lot more we can talk about on RIA. We can leave that for another day, because that's a whole nother hour or so. Yeah. Okay. Anything else?
That conversation can go to Katie next, because she's such a capable person who's going to be able to move a lot of this stuff forward. So I think by the time I'll be a little over 10 years on the board, but I think I've got 41 hours and 41 days and 12 hours.
Who's counting?
I got the countdown going here now. It's been quite a season to be at the RIA through the pandemic. Oh man, what so many things that most people never really know about. It's not really that important. It's just what a deal to navigate that pandemic. Wow.
Well, you've done a great job, and Katie's going to do a great job. Of course, she's an amazing leader and strong and knows her stuff. So he's wonderful, and the association is going to be. It's never about a person. This is the thing that I think everyone should be able to take some comfort in. It's not like if Katie, something happened to Katie, and she just decided, I don't want to be in this industry anymore. I mean, she does so many things in her community. She said, I'm going to do something else in my community, that RIA would be doomed, right? I mean, our board, oh my God, so strong. And this year, I pity our members having to actually vote this year for new board members. Oh, I'm excited.
Because it is, I just, every single candidate is so qualified. And I remember back in the days years ago, it was we begged people to be on the board. I mean, we are there. There are going to be some incredibly brilliant, smart, committed people who are not going to be on the board. And that's tough, tough stuff. But the whole board is strong. Executive committee is lots of bright people, so a bright future for RIA.
Love it. Okay. Anything else you want to share on the fleet conversation or acquisitions, M&A, anything like that before we wrap it?
Man, I think we covered so much stuff there on that front. I mean, I think the last thing I would say, I guess, about this is that that whole FOMO thing we talk about, that fear of missing out thing, don't let that drive your decision-making process. I guess one last plug on that. Independents are going to have some very, very stiff competition. But I think at the end of the day, as long as an organization understands what they want to do, what is my place in the market, and then they bring people into that they just value and invest in and take care of and let unleash their human potential with, to the benefit of the customer, that is always going to have a place. So, there's going to be independents that are still on the other side of this that are very successful. And so, it might not feel that way, but for some folks, that might be the best decision. And as long as you are able to work through a process where here's what I want to do, and here's how I'm going to pursue this, it's all going to be okay.
Perfect. Well, Mark, thank you for your time, and thank you for sharing your wisdom and the Dayspring and Fleet story. And I look forward to seeing you in April at the convention.
I can't wait. Always great to see everybody in the flesh.
Yes, always.
For more Restoration Today, visit our website, cnrmagazine.com, or find us wherever you get your favorite podcasts.